Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome back to Every Version Ever. Today we're finishing up our mini-series on all the 2022 versions of Pinocchio. Today we're talking about the good one, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. We've got a big panel of guests today. I'm joined by three of my regular co-hosts all at once, Sarah, Katie, and Eli. And just for clarity's sake, I should mention that we recorded this one in January, so at the time, obviously, the Oscars had not happened yet, and that becomes part of the discussion toward the end. At the time this episode comes out, the Oscars happened last week, and this film, very deservedly, won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. This one's going to be a long one, so I don't want to draw out the intro, but before we get into it, I just wanted to let you know that if you want more of our conversation, there will be an extended version of this episode available to listen to on my Patreon. The four of us talked for almost 2.5 hours about this movie, and while I was able to pare it down quite a bit for the podcast, I do still have a 2-hour version available now for those who want even more. Okay, I think that's all for now. Let's just jump right into things, talking with Eli, Sarah, and Katie about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. This one is so different than any other Pinocchio version that I've seen.
It kind of needed to be.
Yes. I'm glad that this one set itself apart so well. Most Pinocchio stories, it's basically a fairy tale in almost a fairy tale land. It's probably Italy, but everything is magical and whatever. This is set in fascist Italy between World War I and World War II, which is such an interesting concept, and I'm wondering why he chose that. But I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
He's probably a history buff.
Probably.
I mean, the fact that the original Pinocchio was an Italian story,
mm-hmm.
and then he thought Benito Mussolini is Italian, it would be interesting if it combined.
Well, and I mean, it lends itself to heartbreaking stories between fathers and sons
mm-hmm.
in an odd
way.
And also, if we think about, what year did Disney's Pinocchio come out?
For 40 or 41.
So it's around the time of the Second World War, and I wonder if that didn't get his creative juices flowing to set it in that era as well.
That's an interesting thought. I wouldn't have ever even made that connection.
Yay, I contributed! I didn't take any notes, but I have now officially contributed to this podcast. Yay! Okay, moving on.
He does like to set a lot of his movies in very politically significant times in history, so that's kind of his
Didn't he do that with Pan's Labyrinth?
Yeah.
What time was that? I haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth.
Neither have I.
I think I using my great knowledge and not Google, it was 1944.
Okay, so World War II era. So he's probably already very interested in that era.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I would enjoy having a cup of tea with this person. I don't know.
And this version is also narrated by the cricket, whose name is Sebastian J. Cricket, which I'm wondering if the J was supposed to stand for Jiminy. He's not named... I think he's just the cricket in the book. He's not named Jiminy. That was a Disney thing. But Sebastian J. Cricket is such a perfect name. It fits this character to a T.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He does look and sound like a Sebastian, like a fancy name.
I love that he's a writer and he's kind of he's full of himself, but in a charming way.
He's done enough things to be impressed with himself.
Yes.
And since he's not down, he's not weighed down by the realities of life, I suppose.
Oh, lucky him.
I mean, you don't want a cricket to be weighed down by the realities of life. It is a cricket.
That's true.
And I think it's an interesting... I mean, this whole tapestry of events that they weave at the beginning with the pine cone and the tree and Sebastian moving into the tree. It's very creative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that part when he's inside the tree, and so therefore he's also Pinocchio's conscience, and so it worked out as a metaphor.
It's interesting how Guillermo coming from Mexico, where Catholicism would be so deeply rooted, and then doing an Italian story where that is also so deeply rooted, and how that was woven into the story in a way that you wouldn't have expected. And maybe I'm jumping ahead, but also to have the clergy simultaneously wanting to be pious, but also getting caught up in this movement that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't see it coming. I did not expect it to go so deep.
No, the first time he showed me a trailer, like, I think I was tearing up over like 3 minutes or whatever. This plot line, like, I have one or more complaints about this movie, but it's so creative and so good that it almost feels bad to complain about anything. And it makes so much sense the way they set it up to have him lose his son and basically lose everything and then be given a son in the form of this puppet. It makes so much more sense than Disney's story.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's even in the book, too. I think that's something he came up with independently.
And didn't he say that he's very interested in exploring stories between fathers and sons?
I think so.
It's like, how many parallels does he have between himself and Disney? I don't know.
That is interesting, yeah.
I did like how if you compare the Disney version of Pinocchio's creation to the Guillermo del Toro version of Pinocchio's creation, and how in Guillermo del Toro's version, he's basically like, he creates Pinocchio in a drunken haze.
Mm-hmm.
And in the drunken haze creation, Pinocchio turns out to be mischievous and naughty, kid.
Oh my goodness, they had such horror film vibes with him up in that attic.
Well, even his creation was filmed like Frankenstein coming to life.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of that, yeah, Guillermo del Toro was like, he said he was interested in directing Frankenstein once, and like, so he's a fan of that.
Right.
Clear inspiration from Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. I should also mention before we get too far in, but the beginning scene with the flashback with Sebastian talking about his son, Carlo. When it first started, I was like, oh, it's probably just going to be a little scene showing that he had a son, and then it'll flash forward back to him, like, creating Pinocchio. But this scene just kept going on. I was like, oh, they're building up for something bad. We're about to assault your feelings with this one. Yeah. And it was like 10 minutes into the movie before Carlo died.
Really?
Yeah.
But they set him up as such a sweet boy, mm-hmm. and Geppetto as very pious Catholic and building the crucifix for the church, and then warplanes coming, and it's almost like a Big Hero 6 moment where the little boy goes back into the church, and that's mm-hmm. it. But yeah,
and you knew what was going to happen, and that's sort of what made it even more suspenseful, because mm-hmm. That something sad is about to happen right now, and am I emotionally prepared or am I not?
It's also made worse by, and this is something that's not explained, like, where's his mom? Like, what tragedy has he already potentially experienced, and now this one treasure that he had is gone.
Yeah.
So led to a bad loop of depression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the crucifix is not getting fixed after it's been bombed, which, like, I would think that would be pretty traumatic to go in there and work on the project that you were working on when your son was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
that would explain why he didn't go back and fix it until he had Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Right.
And he'd already been rebuked about it.
Mm-hmm. The whole thing with the pine cone, Carlo had this pine cone, and he left it in the church, and he ran back to get it. And after Carlo has died, Geppetto plants it, and it grows into a tree. And then, like you said, in a drunken haze, he chops down this tree to remake Carlo.
After the pine cone got blown out of the church, but Carlo didn't.
Mm-hmm.
This is very pitiful. But I already knew going into the movie that he was going to lose a son, so at least I had that brace.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of this, of course, is being watched by the cricket who is telling us this story. And he says that he's not alone in watching Geppetto. And there's all these floating eyes in the forest watching as well, which it's described as a wood sprite, but I think, I'm not sure if it says later in the movie or if it was in the behind the scenes, it's the counterpart to death. So this is life.
Yeah, when you Google it, it says that they're life and death. So even though it might be described as a sprite, it's bigger than that.
Yeah. And all of the eyes that are floating around in the forest come together and become this creature who is so creative. I love her design. And I don't know, it could be me reading too much into it, but her tail and also Death's tail looks very pinecone-like.
No, I think that they did say that that was like Death's tail was based off of pinecone scales.
Okay.
I think you're right. I have so many questions about this, and I don't think that the internet is answering them. Either that I'm not asking enough about the design of these creatures, because it's like, okay, how much of this is based off of sheer fantasy? How much of it is based off of maybe ancient history? But there's, and you know, don't take me too seriously, but there's something slightly biblical about these creatures, because if you read about angels in the Bible, sometimes or heavenly creatures, they can be full of eyes. And they're, you know, angels in the Bible, they're not cute chubby little babies, they're terrifying powerful beings. And so these creatures are so interesting, and it was kind of weird for me because probably my favorite character in this movie is Death. So we can loop into that later, but we're not to death yet. Pinocchio hasn't died yet for the however many times that he dies, like 3 or 4 times. But yeah, no, very interesting design, very interesting concept, and I can't tell where all of the inspiration is coming from.
I'm sure it was many inspirations all coming together into one imaginative creature, or 2 imaginative creatures.
Yeah.
Could be.
You're probably right that Guillermo del Toro probably got the inspiration from like multiple places, probably the one you're talking about the multiple eyes, and he's probably like, yeah, you're not meant to know exactly what it is because this is my creation, and it's like it's just an original creature I just created for this movie. Like it's probably the attitude.
They're intriguing, especially Death.
I do like the design.
Yeah, and I love that he didn't just go with the blue fairy, because the blue fairy has been done so many times, and I love that he's put his own stamp on literally everything, including the creature that brings Pinocchio to life. And instead of just the blue fairy, she's this fantastic designed creature. And I just really like her design.
Yeah, she didn't look like a fairy to me. Like she looked more like some kind of like goddess.
Yeah, you don't look at that and think fairy.
No.
And you gotta love like the occasional blink of the eyes all over. Like that's good. It's good.
I mean, I think I like first saw her in like the trailer or something before the movie came out, and then there was like as soon as I saw her, it was like I was not surprised this is the direction Guillermo del Toro was going to go, because it looks exactly like something out of like Pan's Labyrinth or something.
And here's the thing, I don't know if I've ever seen a Guillermo del Toro movie. Most of his stuff would be too scary for me. I'm glad he made something that I can happily watch.
His stuff is all really dark.
Katie, what did you think of the design of these creatures? How did they make you feel?
I love them. I'm going to just say I'm in the same boat. I have technically seen other of his movies because I've seen the Hellboy movies, but I feel like that's not really a good showcase of his work. No offense.
That doesn't sound like something I would cozy up with at night.
I think it's a superhero movie about a demon who doesn't want to be a demon and becomes a superhero.
Oh, good for him.
Oh yeah,
a redemption story.
I've heard that they're kind of seen as like some of his worst movies. I don't know. They're like goofy, cheesy fun, but I don't think they're probably what people would say is a good example of his work. But like, again, I don't like scary things, so
Yay!
like I'll like look at a thing from Pan's Labyrinth and be like, that was horrible. I mean, I appreciate the artisticness of it, but no, thank you.
Honestly, sometimes I can't even handle like a still pictures from horror movies. Like I've had it where I was kind of traumatized just from still pictures of horror movies, or like watching 5 seconds or whatever from a bad movie, like no, and they're dead, okay, or possessed, that's just great, okay.
Hellboy is like, I understand why Hellboy wouldn't be as popular with Guillermo del Toro fans, because it's not as scary as his other movies, and like Jonathan said, it's like sort of like a superhero film, so it's sort of geared more towards like the Marvel and DC kind of thing, but it's way different from like something like Crimson Peak or like Kronos or like his like darker movies.
Yeah.
I looked up a bunch of movie titles a while back, and because we were watching this and I was just familiarizing myself more with his work, but I don't think I've seen any of them. So
yeah, okay.
But yes, I always love his creature designs, even if they absolutely terrify me because they're so unique. So I really like them.
Cool.
Yeah, that's definitely like some of his best work in the Pinocchio movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. What did they say? It took like 15 years or something?
When did this start? Because I know this was in development for ages.
I don't remember how long it took, but you're right. I know that it was like a lot of years. Like it was in development probably like either in the 2010s or like.
It was originally announced in 2008.
Wow.
Yeah,
a million years ago.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back, but let's keep moving forward here. But no, wow.
This was a passion project, you can tell.
Yeah.
Well, hey, the Mona Lisa took 16 years of him messing around with that, so.
Are you serious?
He would carry it with him and pick away at it. It wasn't like he rushed his way through it. And that's the way it can be. That's the way it can be with creative projects. You spend 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, the lighting needs to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm not surprised by that because I make things too. I draw my own comics sometimes. Like, and I made like something in 2021 and I finished it in 2023. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Sure. So yeah, it was his nice thing to carry with him and pick away at. But yeah. Anyway.
I guess while we're on the subject of the creation of the movie, we should talk about the writer too, because he wrote the first draft, but then he got Patrick McHale to flesh out the script. And Patrick McHale is the creator of Over the Garden Wall, which is another thing that I just love.
Oh my goodness. Like that guy is just kind of a kindred spirit. I don't know him, but we definitely have a similar wavelength. So
oh yeah, weren't you both like huge fans of like Over the Garden Wall?
Yeah, we did a whole podcast talking about every episode in detail.
Right.
It was like over 2 hours.
Yeah, and now for Christmas, Jonathan has an Over the Garden Wall t-shirt that I picked out for him. And that show with his sense of history and ephemera and just the aesthetics of that show. Yeah, no, he's a kindred spirit for sure.
Yeah. Oh, great. He was like the co-writer of this, right?
Yes.
Right.
Which would also suggest that he has some depth if he's helping flesh out this script.
Oh yeah. Right.
He's probably about your age, right? Middle 30s-ish?
I think so. Let me look him up.
Patrick McHale?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was born in 1983.
Okay.
So he's 39. A little bit older than me.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I guess getting back on topic.
Wherever that is, I don't know. Pinocchio's come to life now in a sort of horror film, Frankenstein sort of way.
Yes.
But also funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the cricket has been tasked as, I don't think she says be his conscience, but she wants him to make sure that he is good.
Like a mentor and a babysitter.
Yes, and I like that she has put him in charge because he's already in his heart, because he lives literally inside the puppet, because he lived in the tree.
Right.
Did she put it that way?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
That's not the exact quote, but yes.
Nice.
And she promises that if he does this for her, she will grant him one wish. And he really wants to get his book published. So he says he'll try his best, and that's the best anyone can do. And then he's really proud of himself for that quote.
I think I have moments like that. Like, oh, wasn't that clever, that thing that I just said?
And I also like that he's named his book that he's working on The Stridulations of My Youth.
Does that have to do with the chirping noises?
I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what stridulations mean.
Okay, now we got to find out what stridulations mean. We'll be done with this by 1:00. Oh boy.
Oh, it is.
Yay!
Perfect.
A high-pitched chirping, grating, hissing, or squeaking sound as male crickets and grasshoppers make by rubbing certain body parts together.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Now you guys have another 50-cent college word.
I learned something new.
Woo. So he's the conscience.
And we've already talked about him being woken up, and Geppetto wakes up and finds Pinocchio alive, and Pinocchio is basically destroying the house as he's singing "Everything Is New to Me." I love that scene. I love that song. The songs in this movie are great, but I love Pinocchio singing happily as he's almost destroying the house and
killing Geppetto.
Axes are falling.
I was surprised because I didn't know this was going to have songs in it. So when I went in, I was like, "Oh, that's awesome," because they're all so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good that you liked that. If you were a person who absolutely hated musicals, then you'd just be, yeah, you'd have to tough it out in this movie. One of the funny things about this movie is how Sebastian just cannot get through with his song until the very end, where he gets it at the credits. Yeah,
that makes me laugh. That running gag.
Like, you poor guy. You're trying to have a teaching moment and it's just not working.
There's a lot of running gags with Sebastian, including that he gets squished all the time, but thankfully he survives.
Definitely cartoon moments with that.
Yeah, like Wile E. Coyote.
Love hurts.
I guess that's a reference to the book where Pinocchio gets so annoyed with Jiminy Cricket that he smashes him with a hammer.
Right.
But I think he's actually dead in the book, isn't he? It's been so long since I've read. It's been so long since I've read the book that I can't remember everything from it.
Good old fairy tales.
Yeah, I've never I've never read the book, but from what I hear, he died in the very first scene he's in, and then he comes back as a ghost, I think, but like he died in the first scene, which is shocking when you think about
Ghost Cricket.
When you think about how the cricket is used in like the movies. It's like,
yeah.
But that you had to do that because that would never work in a Hollywood movie where you killed him like in the beginning of the film. People would like tune out after that and be like, "What? He died already?" Like,
I mean, it was 1941 or whatever. They'd have kept watching. They paid for the ticket. They'd have watched it. The theater had air conditioning. Why leave? I mean,
it was during World War II. Let's stay inside the bunker and watch this movie, I guess.
Back at Geppetto beating Pinocchio.
He's not into it at all.
Yeah, he doesn't want anything to do with him at first. He stuffs him in a closet and tells him to stay there. He's going to church, and Pinocchio has this scene where he does not want to obey. I like the conversation about that. And he tries to follow him to church, and the cricket is telling him that he's got to try to obey. He's got to try his best, and that's the best anyone can do. He really likes that line. After he said it the one time, it keeps coming back up again.
Yeah.
It makes sense the way they set this up for him to go into the church and for them to think that this is something demonic and to be mad that he's made this and not finished the crucifix. Because in the original, you have this little puppet boy, but I don't think anybody's questioning it at all.
At least not in the Disney version. I don't think anybody thinks.
And in this
twice.
one, it makes sense that if you had highly religious people where all of a sudden there's a puppet that's alive in your congregation who's not being well behaved, that you would not, you'd be unsettled.
Yeah, that is true.
That was the most realistic thing about the movie, the fact that they thought the puppet was demonic.
And you'd have no context for it to be anything else but, because you can't see any mechanics or anything. Anyway, you could just totally pick that apart. But it added some humor and realism to the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting just how they folded both clergy and sketchy police into this storyline.
Yeah, the Podesta, I think he's like the police chief.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure if that's like what his title would be.
Yeah, he was just some fascist government official.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting that, like, this is Wikipedia, so I'm not sure if this is something that they know for a fact or if somebody has put their own idea in here. But it says on the Wikipedia page that he is the counterpart to the coachman from the original story, which makes perfect sense.
Oh, because of all the little boys?
Yes.
Oh,
I didn't put that together.
No, that did not occur to me at all.
Yeah, it didn't to me until I started reading the Wikipedia page, and I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But his personality is so different from the coachman.
That's true. The gas masks, I don't know if you noticed, but they were kind of elongated, and they kind of look like donkey faces.
Oh,
that they put on the
I
kids
didn't
later.
Even think of that either.
I need to look at that again. Yeah.
Was that purposeful, or is that just your observation?
I don't know.
I think it's an interesting concept anyway. And if I watch it again, I'm going to have to pay attention.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was purposeful. It'd be a very subtle touch, but that's perfect if true.
Yeah, well, it's true now. It's been said. It's going to go on the internet, and now it's true.
Yes.
Oh yeah, this is where the rumor started.
Now I'm going to have to rewatch this movie. I don't know. I'm sure this is probably one of those that you could watch 5 times and still see stuff that you missed.
Oh, I'm sure there's so many little things that he was hiding in the backgrounds and the paintings on the walls and everything.
One of the things that I live in a household full of creative people, and if you look at the window in Geppetto's workshop, he's done carving across the casing about 2/3 of the way, but he's not finished. And that reminds me of my household. Like, I'm working on this creative project, but I'm not quite there yet. Yeah. But no.
Another realistic touch about that movie.
Yes. But it was like the Podesta, I think, pretty quickly started getting ideas about what Pinocchio should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's at the church along with his son, Candlewick, and he comes to visit him after the whole incident at the church because, well, you have the first instance of Pinocchio's nose growing when he claims that he's a real boy made of flesh and bone and meaty bits. And his nose grows into a branch and everybody freaks out even more. Then, the priest freaks out, tells him to get out. And then they go home and he carves down his nose, and then the priest and the Podesta show up to find out what he intends to do with Pinocchio.
It's like this little intervention meeting.
Yeah.
Little hand-holding, hand slap.
Geppetto promises them that he's going to keep him locked up, but Pinocchio is yelling that he won't be locked up. He'll smash out the windows, he will.
And this is where he develops his love of hot chocolate, which plays into the plot line, and nearly burns himself.
Yeah, he says he'll obey for hot chocolate.
And that's how people work, honestly. You want me to do something I don't want to do? Well, ride me.
But I loved when he's yelling about smashing out the windows. You can see the priest crossing himself while the Podesta is thinking about all the possibilities for Pinocchio.
It's interesting how his relationship with Candlewick develops, because this is kind of where it begins, and Candlewick wishes him ill, and he's just kind of a little snotty bully type character, but how it develops into a friendship with mutual affection and respect is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the coachman's very interested in war and soldiers and being tough. And
that was a plot point I truly did not see coming. And like when I found out Pinocchio was going to be enlisted in a war as a soldier, but it was a nice touch. It was unexpected, so I liked it.
It worked well for the story.
Yeah.
Of course, you have the two plot lines with Geppetto not wanting to accept Pinocchio, not being supportive, wanting him to be something other than he is, and the Podesta wanting to make his son into a little soldier and not respecting any form of perceived weakness, and the struggle that they both have of Candlewick wanting so badly to impress his father and therefore be loved, and Pinocchio struggling because he can't be somebody else, but he still wants to be loved and somehow make his father proud. So it's, I mean, both important angles and stories to be telling about fatherhood, but the people who are like that, I don't know how much they're going to think when they watch it. hopefully it blesses somebody, or it may just be the sons all crying. He's like, that was my childhood. I don't know. Hopefully it's a blessing to fathers and sons.
So the movie has got depth. It's like, if there's nothing else,
for sure. Got a lot
of depth.
For sure.
That whole scene ends with the Podesta demanding that he go to school because, well, Pinocchio gets his feet lit on fire and he's all happy about it, and the Podesta says that's what you get with an undisciplined mind.
It's also kind of, they probably emphasize in this movie the importance of education in order to be in line with the state. Am I correct?
I think so.
Because, I mean, during Hitler's time, it was the public the education of youth, the indoctrination of youth was extremely important. So that fits well with this plot line.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of the same thing. I think it was called like the fascist youth, where in Germany it was the Hitler youth, I believe.
I remember a story about this young lady where that was starting up, and her mother stuck her in a Catholic school instead of the regular schools. And when she came back to visit, she was surprised at how much her friends had changed. So the molding of minds through that was definitely real, and you can see how hard this Podesta is. And that was probably Germany or Switzerland or something like that. But you can see how much he wants to mold and influence these kids.
Mm-hmm. But then that night, they go to bed, and you have a whole conversation with Sebastian telling him about Carlo. I liked how they put everything, because he says that he lost him, and Pinocchio's like, how could you lose a whole person? And he explains that he died, and he says, is that a bad thing? Yes, it's a great burden to lose a child so young. What's a burden? It's something painful you must carry, even though it hurts you very much. And that becomes really important later, because Pinocchio at times feels like a burden, and he remembers what Sebastian has told him, that it's something you must carry, that even if it hurts you very much. And being a burden and not being a burden becomes like a really prominent story feature.
Mm.
But then the next day they go into town. He's taking Pinocchio to school, but also he's going to finish the crucifix. And he doesn't actually take Pinocchio to school, which is something that we've said about other versions, specifically the Disney version, but like, you should have just taken Pinocchio straight to school, and you could have avoided a lot of...
In this version, it seems less weird. Like, the Podesta has already said, I want you to go to school. It wasn't just like, oh, I have this magical puppet, off you go. And Geppetto was already struggling with having him around, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes more sense. And this seems like a very insulated village where it should be fine.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that same vibe of like, oh, Geppetto, you idiot. With
that is true. I didn't think of it until my second watch through, the fact that he just kind of sent him off, because it is a smaller town, and well, I mean, he probably would have ended up in the war anyways, because eventually the Podesta just took all the kids out of the school anyway.
Hmm.
So he eventually would have probably ended up in the same place, but he could have bypassed Count Volpe because that's what happens next. He's tricked by Count Volpe via the monkey, seeing him in town and going to tell him.
A monkey!
Yes.
Do you have something you want to say about this, Katie?
I love the monkey.
Me too.
It's so ugly.
It looks like something I would adopt.
Right?
You know, with that little fogged out eye.
That is true.
Like, you need me.
Like, it showed up and I just shout out loud, I love the ugly monkey.
Yeah. You should have run outside and just screamed that at the top of your No.
I was looking up pictures of the monkey after I watched the movie, and I found out that its name means garbage.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is perfect. That is so... Oh, thank you for telling me that. That is so perfect because it shows... It folds in so perfectly with the manipulative, abusive relationship that he had with this monkey. Mm-hmm. And it shows you that that was from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, he was never a good guy to this monkey. I think the creators probably really loved the sort of beginning scene with the monkey after he spotted Pinocchio and he goes back and he's hurriedly making his way through all of the circus people. Like,
that was a really good scene of animation.
Yeah.
It was done by one person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, wow. I remember there was a promotional video and it was just one guy and he did it all. I can't remember his name, unfortunately.
Part of why this took 15 years. And now we move this tiny little piece. Click. And...
I think Henry Selick said that most of the scenes in his movies too were all done by one person. Like, no two animators ever usually work on two characters in one scene. So that makes sense.
I guess that makes sense because it probably would be a situation where if you have too many people working on the same scene, they're kind of just going to get in each other's way.
Yeah.
So it was like two that did that, or just one that was taking all the shots?
Yeah, so how it worked is he would move every little piece and then take a picture and then move every little piece of everything happening on the screen all at once.
Which you'd really have to be about your wits to remember to move everything that needed to be moved.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Especially when the monkey's going past all of the people in the circus, because that's a lot of stuff you got to move.
Yeah.
So, golf clap for that guy.
Oh, that's mind-blowing to me. Like, stop-motion animators are like the biggest wizards of all the different animation mediums, I think, because the amount of things you have to keep track of, I would not be able to like even start thinking.
The amount of patience you would have to have.
Yeah.
Oh, the patience too. Yeah. You have to be patient. That's a job requirement.
Absolutely.
But yeah, they convince Pinocchio to come with them. And the cricket gets smashed again.
Poor baby.
They make him sign this contract, which he signs with a little sun. And the Podesta comes looking for him and the priest, because he never made it to school.
Yeah.
So at the carnival, you have Pinocchio kind of talking to Spazzatura, because Spazzatura doesn't talk except when he's controlling the puppets, which I thought was really interesting, because he can talk to Pinocchio through the puppets.
Maybe he's too afraid to talk to his master.
It could be.
Another thing that's really good about this scene is just the back and forth of convincing him to come along, because it's so human, this idea of, oh, maybe I can have my cake and eat it too. Maybe I can do this thing I'm supposed to do later. Maybe it'll be okay. Letting himself get bribed into it. It's definitely not by force. It's just being lured away. Like, it'll probably be okay, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that Spazzatura could talk to him in this. It was, not to lure him away, but just later.
Right.
But Geppetto eventually finds his book in the street along with the cricket, and then he ends up stepping on him again. But he finds him at the carnival, and I thought it was interesting because Pinocchio's singing this song about bubblegum, and Geppetto asks him why he knows that song. So it makes me think that it's something that Carlo might have known.
It was to the tune of My Son.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that. That's interesting.
I'm a song sponge, so I recognized right away that he was singing the tune, just different words.
Okay. But he drags him out and he's asking Pinocchio what happened, why he didn't go to school. And Pinocchio starts making up a story about bandits and eventually grows a small tree for a nose.
Didn't it have like a bird's nest or was it? No, did it start to fruit?
Yes.
Yeah, it started getting pine cones.
Okay, started getting pine cones. That makes sense.
And they're stopped by Count Volpe. They're fighting over Pinocchio, and he ends up in the middle of the road as the Podesta comes up and hits him with his van. So he is dead.
Why am I laughing about that? I think it was the way you just said that. The Podesta comes up and hits him with his van. So and this is where he dies for the first time. And all of a sudden you have skeleton rabbits, and I was getting Czechoslovakian Alice in Wonderland vibes from this scene.
Yeah, it did have a bit of that. And again, I need to read the book because apparently there are Undertaker rabbits in the book.
Really?
Which I hadn't remembered at all. It's been since I was a kid since I read the book. So apparently these rabbits were based on something from the book.
Okay.
But I don't know that they were described exactly as they are imagined in this version, but apparently there were Undertaker rabbits in the book.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever read the book, so thanks for telling me.
I should read it again since I'm doing this whole series on Pinocchio. I really should read it again.
It's probably not that long, is it?
I'm not sure. I seem to remember it being a very thick book, but I was also a kid, so it's all relative.
It like quadruple size print and it just looked thick?
I don't remember. I think the one we had was very old and falling apart, so I don't even know if we have it around here anymore.
Depending on how thick that book is, that is a huge determining factor on whether I'll read it. So that that is something I want to know.
I believe it was originally published as a serial in a magazine. So it was published chapter by chapter. So it could have gotten quite long depending on how long he was writing it.
Well, that sort of helps because maybe I'll read it chapter by chapter and then it'll seem less long that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's in this afterlife and the rabbits are carrying him in a coffin and he gets out and they question what he's doing and he says, "It's boring in there. I hate being dead."
He was not ready for rest. Time for action. Yeah. And what is it with these rabbits playing poker or whatever? Is there a metaphor here that I'm missing, or did they just feel like that?
I don't know. Maybe that's just what they like to do on their downtime.
I mean, that could just be the case. But if there's a metaphor and somebody knows about it, let me know. Then you'll get like a really thick comment down below. Well, actually, it is.
I do like how Pinocchio is so disobedient that he doesn't even obey death.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, they send him to see the boss, which is where you get Death, another amazing looking creature.
And probably my favorite character in this movie. I don't know.
I don't know what all they put together to make her, but at least on Wikipedia, they describe her as a chimera with the face of a human, the horns of a Cape buffalo, the lower horns of a Jacob sheep with eyes on them, the body of a lion, the wings of a bird with eyes on them, and a two-headed snake-like tail.
Like, this isn't a biblical creature, but it's such a biblical sounding creature. Like,
yeah.
So, I don't know, like, this creature is just so... Well, and here's another thing that you wouldn't think that I would like. So, I'm not into scary movies, but the fact that this creature speaks, but yet it's almost like the creature is wearing a mask and you don't see the mouth moving. Why do I like that? I really like that. This creature is mysterious and majestic and level-headed, and there's depth there and something strangely beautiful and just so interesting.
Well, the mask thing reminded me of No Face, which is another character that Sarah liked, and I didn't think she would like.
Like, well, you didn't think I would like Over the Garden Wall either.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of things that are like mildly creepy that I think that Sarah's not going to like, and then it turns out she does like them.
They speak to me. They speak to me. Like, No Face, there's only so much I like that movie, but that character speaks to me. So, and this, I think I was getting a little bit of No Face vibes, but this creature does not have the same childlike vulnerability that No Face did. Anyway.
Yeah, those things are more eerie maybe than like creepy. Like they're not scary, they're more like eerie, like unnatural.
Yeah.
So I can understand like that, like they don't scare you.
I like that you described it as unnatural. I think there's so many unnatural things that we just don't even know about, and they're natural and we don't know it. But maybe we shouldn't go down that rabbit trail. Back to the skeleton rabbits and the visage of death. But I mean, death could be portrayed as something genuinely scary and hostile and mean, and yet they portrayed it as this wise, mysterious creature. A little bit irritated, but not irritating, just irritated, like my sister's sentimentality or whatever.
Yeah, I do like that.
They could have done the whole Black Cloak and Sickle thing, which might have actually disturbed me, but not this creature.
Yeah, I like that because it's such a cliche and it's so like an obvious thing, like the portrayal of death and what death looks like, and then the fact that they go in a completely different direction was a bold choice.
And the concept of death or a spirit of death, depending on the context and the creature or the person or whatever facing death, it doesn't have to be something terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I loved about it. It's like they treat death not like a scary thing, but like a mysterious thing.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't have to be bad. But yeah. Okay, so Pinocchio finds out that he is sort of immortal.
Yes, she says. This is another thing that they never really dived into this, but she calls him the wooden boy with the borrowed soul, my sister's folly. And I don't really know how much they were, like, it's obvious that they're not going for reincarnation. Like, this is not Carlo, because they specifically say that he's not Carlo.
But it really seems kind of like it's an iteration of Carlo's.
Something like that. I
don't know, or maybe borrowed because he wasn't supposed to have life.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what. I think it's one of those things where like you can come up with your own meaning for it, because I don't think that they ever gave a specific meaning for some of the things that they said about him.
Which would fit with the writer of Over the Garden Wall. Like, what does this mean?
But she says that she gave you life when you were not meant to have it, which means you can't ever truly die. And he says, and that's good, right? And she says, it means you are not, nor will you ever be a real boy like Carlo. And she says, don't get me wrong, you will die many, many times, this being one of them. But they are not real deaths, just waiting periods. And then she explains how this all works. He has to stay there with her until the hourglass runs out, a little longer each time, and it'll keep happening until the end of time.
I appreciate her having more hourglasses than was needed for the movie, because a little thing that irks me with movies is like they only have 3 hourglasses, and you're like, well, I know how many times he's going to die in the movie.
I don't think I even thought about that.
I wonder if the hourglasses weren't just for Pinocchio, but for other people.
It could have been, but how many times does she get somebody who's basically immortal?
But it could just be for their, I don't know, could it be for their lives? The hourglass of their life, not their death?
I don't know. I do know that I've seen hourglasses as a metaphor for the people's lives in other movies. I can't think of what it is right now, but I know it's been done before. It could be. I don't know. I think it's probably one of those things where they're not going to explain everything.
It adds to the atmosphere.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the fact that hourglasses, the concept of an hourglass is that the sand runs out and then you can turn it upside down and start over and the sand will run out again. that might just be the metaphor of how Pinocchio is just dying over and over. It might just be that simple.
Yeah, could be. But I like that when his time with her ends, he wakes up being inspected by a doctor, and the doctor's like, there's nothing he can do. The body is rigid, and Geppetto's like, he's always been rigid. He's made of wood.
I feel like they shouldn't have called the doctor.
Yeah, I don't know why they took him to a doctor either, because what is a doctor going to do with him?
Completely unhelpful.
I hope he got his fee anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But Count Volpe has followed them to this doctor, and he's demanding that he return with him or be paid 10 million lire, which I'm guessing is the Italian currency. I'm not 100% sure, but
you didn't crunch all the numbers of what that was and include inflation in the US dollar. Come on. Either way, I think the idea is that it's a lot.
Yes. And he says he has the legally binding contract because he signed it with his little son smiling.
Oh, this was so good because all of a sudden Pinocchio's like, I drew that. And it's like, no, you could have gotten out of that, maybe.
I love the little moments of Pinocchio just having no idea what's going on.
It makes sense. Fresh to the world.
Yeah.
But it was also, you also have Count Volpe, like, didn't he say, I can still, use the body,
Yes.
like, if you want to sell it to me. And Geppetto's obviously already getting attached because he's like, how dare you, have some respect.
Podesta basically shoots Count Volpe down and says that his country comes first. And he basically says Pinocchio's immortal, so he has to be drafted into the war. Because, that would be the perfect soldier, somebody who can't die. But Geppetto takes him home and says they'll talk about everything tomorrow. And Geppetto, of course, is extremely upset. He doesn't want Pinocchio to go to war because of what happened to his son. But he doesn't really have a choice. And then you have a whole conversation about you have to obey the law. Even if it's wrong, you still have to do what the law says. And Pinocchio doesn't understand this.
Is this where they have the conversation about how war is not good?
Yes. And Pinocchio keeps going on about everything, and Geppetto gets frustrated and calls him a burden. And of course, he remembers what Sebastian said earlier, so he's extremely upset about this. But later that night, Sebastian tries to explain that sometimes fathers say things in despair that they only think they mean, but with time they realize that they never meant it at all. So this makes Pinocchio feel a little bit better, and he decides he's going to fix things himself by going off to join the carnival. That way he won't have to go to war, and he can send his father money.
And he'll be free of being charged,
yes.
sued or fined or whatever.
Yes.
While I appreciate Sebastian giving him a good life lesson about fathers, he could have been like, no, Pinocchio, human noses don't grow.
That's true, because Pinocchio said he meant what he said because his nose didn't grow. That probably would have been a good explanation. But he did need that line later because that line becomes important later on in the movie.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a good point. Human noses do not grow.
Thankfully.
Oh, God, thank God.
Are you enjoying this episode of the podcast? Do you want more content from me and my friends on the iHeart Movies Podcast Network? We have exclusive bonus episodes, extended episodes, preview content, and more waiting for you right now on Patreon. Patrons also get the chance to request episodes, so if you want me to cover something I've never done before, sign up and let me know. So Pinocchio traps Sebastian under a glass and tells him that he should tell his father that he'll send him money and that he loves him and he won't be a burden anymore. So he runs off back to the carnival and makes Count Volpe promise to forget the money that he wants from his father in exchange for sending him his share of the profits as he works for him. So Geppetto wakes up the next day to find Pinocchio gone, and Sebastian is now squished again because he tried to escape and got hit by the handle of the hammer. So they go off to find him, but the carnival is now gone. And then Sebastian chews him out for being selfish and mopey and not noticing how much Pinocchio loves him. And I don't know how much that got through to him, but he decides to go after him anyway. So
I'm guessing it did.
He doesn't see, like, for this scene and a bunch of other scenes, I was questioning whether or not anyone but Pinocchio could hear Sebastian. Because Geppetto does not react to anything that he's saying, and he doesn't speak to him until later in the movie. So at this point, I was like, can Geppetto actually even hear Sebastian?
But Geppetto was a pretty hard-headed dude, so...
Yes. But they go off to search for him, and then you have a montage of them traveling and time passing while Pinocchio is singing Ciao Papa as he's in the show. And after a while, Pinocchio is famous, and they eventually come up with this patriotic show praising Italy, which attracts the attention of Mussolini. And they are now going to perform for him. And Count Volpe is like super excited about this. He says they're very close, but it's obvious that he doesn't actually know him.
Yeah, like a picture of him with him in the background.
Yes.
It's like ancient selfie.
And through all this, Spazzatura is like really jealous. He wants Pinocchio out of here. He has a very toxic relationship with Count Volpe because he thinks that Count Volpe loves him, but he does not. And through the puppets, Spazzatura tells Pinocchio that Count Volpe doesn't love him. Spazzatura is his favorite. And he actually does tell him the truth that Count Volpe is not sending any money to his father. So he's both manipulating Pinocchio but telling him the truth about what's going on.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, Geppetto has also heard about this performance, and he's trying to get a boat so he can cross whatever body of water this is. I don't think it's an ocean, but he's trying to get to the city that they're performing in.
I think it was a gulf. I think he said it was a gulf.
That sounds right. But he finds this old sea captain to take him, and he doesn't want to go because he tells him about this dogfish, which I believe that it actually, that's what it is in the book, a dogfish. Like, I've always thought of it as Monstro the Whale, but that's because of the Disney version. And I think that that was just something from the Disney version. I'm pretty sure in the book it's just the dogfish, which is this weird, hideous creature with multiple blowholes.
That is gross.
My God, I didn't know that it was originally a whale.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the book it's just the dogfish.
Which makes more sense since a whale couldn't actually swallow anybody, but a giant fish could.
Yeah. And also, if they're not in the ocean, a whale wouldn't fit in a gulf or wherever they are.
Yeah.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
This movie is now logical and totally factual, and the fantasy's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, this could all absolutely happen in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Facts.
But the sea captain does take pity on him, and they go out to sea. And
I kind of like the sea captain.
I love, there's this moment where they're out on the water, and you see all these mines floating in the water, and a seagull and it blows up.
That was, yeah.
I like that. That was funny. I like that.
If you didn't know what they were before, you do now.
But you also have Sebastian trying to sing his song again, but then the dogfish appears and interrupts him.
Yeah.
I like the moment where the sea captain just flops over. Like, okay, bye.
He just jumped overboard.
He was prepared for that moment. Like, he was.
And then, yes, Geppetto and the whole ship are swallowed. And then back at the carnival, Count Volpe has overheard Spazzatura talking to Pinocchio, and he's beating him and saying that he should have left him to die when he found him. Pinocchio runs in to defend him and threatens not to perform for Mussolini. And Count Volpe then turns his threats to Pinocchio, tells him he has no choice, and he chops off the tip of his nose, and he says that he'll work for him until his wooden body rots away. And then he leaves, and Pinocchio tells Spazzatura that he thinks that they should make the show extra special tonight.
This is where his naughtiness comes in handy, where all of his cheek comes in handy.
Yes. And I think I've said this before in other movies, where if you're going to do like bathroom humor, normally I am just like, don't bother. I now hate this movie.
This one, and I'm not going to be singing this song in the shower. No. But
it makes sense in context.
It makes sense in context because it makes sense as a little boy rebelling. Like, he doesn't have all the cuss words. He doesn't have all the context to put out a big fight song against this guy. But it makes sense that he could understand bathroom humor and throw that out there.
Yes.
Exactly.
He's not going to have many other weapons besides that. He's so innocent.
Uh-huh. But then I love how completely unamused Mussolini is.
I no longer like the puppet.
Yes, when he came in, he's like, I like puppets. I don't like this puppet. Shoot him. Burn it all down.
Yeah.
And they probably exaggerated how little he was, but that was part of the fun.
I love his henchman just lifting him out of the car like a little child.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, great.
So yes, Pinocchio is back with death again. And I love how excited he is. He's talking about being the luckiest boy in the world because he can get killed so many times. And Death says that it sounds more like a burden, which of course he doesn't like that. And he says it's not that bad. And he tells her that he's going home to his pop as soon as he wakes up. But then she tells him that he might not see him again because while he is immortal, his father is not. So every moment together might be their last, and you never know how much time you have with someone before they're gone.
That's so sad, but it's also a really good thing to put in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that she had to say was really deep and important, and I'm glad that they talked about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the reason that I like her too.
Yeah. I do think the conversations that they had were probably my favorite scenes in the movie.
Nice.
And he asks her for more information about what she's talking about, but their time is up, and he's back on Earth again. And it turns out that the Podesta was at this show with his son, and he took Pinocchio's body, knowing that he was going to wake up eventually.
Oh, it makes sense that the Podesta would be there.
Yeah.
Probably a duel, killing two birds with one stone. Get the puppet back, but also he's probably close enough to the regime or whatever that it wouldn't have been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm probably overthinking that.
No, I'm sure that's part of it. But then they're at this patriotic youth camp. I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like that, where they're training for battle. This is where you get Pinocchio and Candlewick first fighting and pretending to love war and talking about how much they love war more than the other person. But you get the sense that Candlewick is just really trying to please his father. And Pinocchio ends up giving him the same speech that Sebastian gave him earlier about fathers feeling despair and saying things that they don't mean. And after that, they're friends. And then the next day, they end up on opposing teams in this battle training game, which is basically capture the flag, I believe. But there's also like paint guns. And I'm not sure if that's historically accurate.
Little do you realize that's when it started.
It could have
Okay,
been.
now I need to know how old are paint guns? Were paint guns used in World War II?
Yeah.
But I like that scene of them having the conversation while they're lying in their beds. And I like that they had them form a cooperative friendship. Like they showed how people should act with each other, of supporting each other, helping each other.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find the history of paint guns.
Yes.
What I'm finding is it was sometime in the 1960s.
Okay.
That's all I'm seeing too, but it's like it said specifically paintball guns, but I don't know if there was something different earlier than that or not. I don't know. But 1960s sounds correct. But this is fantasy anyway, so I guess we probably shouldn't.
No, we gotta throw the whole thing out now. It's no good anymore.
But yeah, this is basically a war game, but with paint guns. And Pinocchio and Candlewick end up calling it a draw because they both get their flags and tie them together and declare that they've both won. which Candlewick's father does not like, and he demands that Candlewick shoot Pinocchio right then and there.
Which is so World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about, wasn't it the Nazis that they would take a young man and have them raise a dog, and then they'd have them, so that they would get attached to this dog and then say you have to shoot the dog. And so I feel like that fits perfectly with the World War II narrative.
Wow.
I don't think I've heard that specifically, but that reminds me of the movie Jojo Rabbit with the rabbits and the Nazis. So that movie was super dark. I loved that movie, but I don't know if I'll ever watch it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that made me think of that, and it fits so well with that time period. And it's so messed up because they're being an example of how nations should and people should treat each other, and like, nope, you gotta win. You gotta use death and violence here.
That was my favorite thing, the anti-war method, basically, of Pinocchio and Candlewick refusing to defeat each other.
What's really nutty about this that you wouldn't expect is just how much Candlewick stands up to his father, because he's so young to be having that type of conversation of like, I'm not going to be good enough for you. This isn't working. But it's, I don't know, kind of nice that they included that instead of just having him cower and cooperate.
Yeah, such a satisfying confrontation.
Which shows a lot of strength on his part, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, especially knowing what happens next, because his father does not accept his standing up to him at all.
This was nuts, though, because, okay, so that you actually do have the bad guys getting their comeuppance in this movie, but after his father gets killed, it's like Candlewick's like, where's Pinocchio? Like, forget that jerk. Where's Pinocchio? And it's like, is this realistic? Like, didn't you just watch your father die? And now you're like, where's the puppet? He was nice to me. The other guy wasn't. I don't know.
It's probably one of those things where he's probably just in shock and he'll process the emotions later.
Sure. We can go with that.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, they're actually attacked. Bombs drop. His father's dead. Pinocchio and Candlewick do escape, but Pinocchio is captured by Count Volpe, who had apparently followed them there to try and get him back. And he just decides to burn him alive. Like, he's done using it for money, apparently. He's just going to set him on fire now for revenge or whatever.
Well, after you upset Mussolini, can you make money off of the thing anyway?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and well, but Mussolini did say burn it all down, so he probably doesn't even have a carnival anymore, so...
Sure. So it kind of makes sense that he would want vengeance at that point.
Yeah.
But this was one of the best things, honestly. Like, I don't know if it's better than Candlewick, but you have the fact that you have the monkey who's done being abused and is seeing red at this point. Enough is enough. You're horrible to me, you're horrible to Pinocchio, and I'm done.
Yes.
And then he goes ham on his face.
Katie quotes. He goes ham on his face.
Yeah, I almost was afraid that they were going to get real graphic there, because I've heard stories of what monkeys can do to humans. I'm kind of glad that they didn't, and it was good the way they ended up doing it, with him ending up falling off a cliff and just hitting a rock and dying.
That was like classic Disney.
It actually was, yes.
Yeah, unlike the Disney Pinocchio.
Was there any parallel, and maybe this isn't even anything, but didn't he kind of put Pinocchio on a cross?
Kind of.
Was there any kind of relationship to the wooden crucifix?
Well, it could have been a callback to the scene in the church when Pinocchio asks, why do they like that guy and not me? Because we're both made of wood, but they're singing to him and they're afraid of me.
And I don't know if there's any connection whatsoever, but yeah, I don't know what was going through their minds on that. But I'm glad the Spazzator intervened.
Yes.
And that it worked out.
Yeah.
And it's so great that Spazzator actually got to start got to be adopted and to have a different life with a loving family.
Yes.
Which is kind of jumping ahead, but still.
This is about the point where it happens anyways, because they're kind of together from this point on.
Like, they could have gotten really dark with that, like with Spatzatura dying too, or being beaten to death or something like that. So the fact that they chose to have a happy ending is nice.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that they did that.
Yeah, please don't kill the monkey.
Oh my God. Too sad. It would have been too sad.
Yeah, Pinocchio and Spatzatura end up floating out to sea. Of course, they're also swallowed by the dogfish, and everybody's reunited. And at this point, like the Disney version, Geppetto's kind of resigned himself. He thinks that there's no escape. They're going to be there forever.
I love how he's using Sebastian to fish with.
I mean, Sebastian at this point is almost immortal too. The end shows you it's not true, but at this point, nothing could kill him. So might as well.
They could have had him be a ghost cricket for all of this.
They could have. But Sebastian has an idea. They end up climbing up a lighthouse because apparently this dogfish has swallowed an entire lighthouse and it is still intact.
That's a good touch.
Yes. And they use that to get up to one of the blowholes, which they can't quite get to, but Pinocchio starts lying to make them a bridge out of his nose.
And isn't that a gross blowhole?
Yes.
Nice and fleshy. Okay.
And mucusy.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, the blowholes on this thing are basically like elephant trunks. They end up getting sneezed out, and Pinocchio barely makes it out, so he's kind of separated from the rest of them. And he lands on one of those mines, not to the point where it explodes, but he's on it, and he gets swallowed again.
I think they blew up the bird to give context.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, foreshadowing.
And I've been avoiding comparing this movie to a certain other movie for most of this, but there's one part in here that I cannot help but draw a parallel to the Disney remake. Because Spatzatura uses his tail like a motorboat, just like Pinocchio was basically a motorboat in the live-action remake, which in that one I thought was incredibly stupid and I hated. But I kind of loved the Spatzatura was the motorboat in this one.
I noticed that, and I was like, I thought it was amazing that it was amazing enough that I saw two Pinocchio movies in 2022 so close to each other. But the fact that they both did the motorboat thing, I was like, I mean, Guillermo del Toro can really kind of get away with more things because he did such a better job with this one. So it's sort of like in the context of the rest of the movie, you can sort of be like leaving a tail as a motorboat. That's kind of a clever thing. And
there was a bunch of things that I could have compared between the two, and I've avoided because I don't want to talk about that one anymore. We spent enough time on that one, but I felt like I had to mention that because the motorboat thing was just so coincidental that both of them would do the same thing, but it's so much better done in this one.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It was impossible not to notice how similar they were. Although if it were up to me and I was the director, I wouldn't do any motorboating like the tail over the legs. I think it's sort of like a dumb no matter what movie's doing it, but that's just me.
I was spared the live action remake of Pinocchio.
No, lucky you.
We don't recommend it.
I don't think I was that. I don't know how impressed I was by the trailer, let alone having to. No, but this one, I was like, I was on board watching this.
I really don't think that you need to check out.
There are other things that one can watch.
There are so many movies in the world that
Hellboy. I mean, Pan's Labyrinth.
There are so many versions of Pinocchio in the world that you don't need to watch the worst one.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, back to the movie.
Yeah.
We're doing pretty well, honestly.
We are. We're not doing too many rabbit trails, and all the rabbit trails are technically on topic. But Pinocchio is back in the thing's mouth, and he sees that it's about to get Geppetto, and they're all about to be eaten again. So he goes down the throat to set off the mine that the thing has swallowed. So he kills the dogfish by blowing it up. But
he
of course,
lets go before it blows up and turns him into splinters.
Yes.
Which was kind of good that they gave that context. Otherwise, that would not make sense for him to show up in the afterlife intact.
Yes, he ends up back with Death again and demands that she send him back, but she says that she can't send him back yet. There are rules because every time he's there, he has to stay for longer. But she tells them that if he wants to, he can break the rules. He can break the hourglass and send himself back, but this will be the last time that he can come back and go back. And he chooses to do this. He smashes the hourglass. He goes back to Earth. He barely rescues Geppetto in time with his mangled body, and he ends up...
not Geppetto's.
Yes, Pinocchio is basically... He's missing some limbs because of the explosion.
Which I also have a question, because Spazzatura was saying, like, you could use another ear and a pair of pants. Did Geppetto never quite finish him? Okay, yes. He didn't then.
Because when he's carving him out of the wood... he's drunk, and he says at the end, "I'll finish you in the morning."
Sure.
And then he tries to go upstairs and ends up falling down the stairs and going to sleep on the floor.
Sure.
So yes, he never had another ear.
And this is where my beef is about to begin.
Mm-hmm.
So he rescues him with his feeble little nubbly body. And they're on the beach, as they should be after, towards the end of a movie where you've nearly died, just pathetically lying on the beach. But the spirit comes along. Of course, you've got your pitiful, "Oh no, he's dead. Dead Tom's dead." No. And she's like, "Well, to save you, he became a real boy." At this point, he should be a real boy, not his little wooden self. Okay? Why?
Oh, yeah.
If you're gonna put that in there. Also, I just wanted him to be a real boy at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, technically, again, I really hate to bring up the live-action remake. The same thing sort of happened in that one, where he did not turn into a human being.
Well, I think with this one, the point is that Pinocchio wasn't Carlo, and he wasn't who everyone wanted him to be. He was just Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And Pinocchio is a wooden puppet.
But he could be a different boy. He could look different. Made of flesh and bone and meaty bits.
Right.
No, I get it, but I think the point was that he was true to himself instead. And so him turning into a person, they could have thought that was he still changed. So they didn't want to.
I think you're far more accepting of this than I am, and maybe you'll make me come around. I feel like if he stays a puppet, that he also stays, not that is an extremely vulnerable being a human, but I feel like he stays more vulnerable as this anthropomorphic puppet, but also kind of immortal as this anthropomorphic puppet. I don't know. I wanted him to be a real boy.
It's interesting how in the recent Pinocchio remix that came out last year, it seems like the idea of not turning Pinocchio into a human at the end is something that both of them, even though Robert Zemeckis and Guillermo del Toro movies are completely different, it seems like they both thought of this, and it's sort of interesting because it's I always thought, I agree with Sarah that I would rather he turn into a human at the end of the movie, because I feel like that was the entire point of the movie, was that he was trying to be a real boy, and then, oh my God, at the end he finally becomes a real boy, and that's it. Then he succeeds.
And how beautiful if he's a real boy who can grow into a man. And you could have had that towards the end of visiting the graves and having all of his loved ones die off, and then he's heading out into the world to live life, to really live.
Right. To live a normal life.
And it's are you just doing this because you're what can we make different? I mean, with Guillermo, I'm willing to think that he had a deeper intention than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But still, for my druthers.
I get the feeling that the reason why they do that is because it's like the idea of, like sort of like what Jonathan was saying, the idea of changing him at the end sort of betrays like him as a character throughout the movie. I was like, well, if he's changing, that's not who he is. It's like, that's not the real Pinocchio. That's a human boy, and that's not who he really is. And it's interesting, I guess, but I feel like that sort of misses the original point of the story if he doesn't become a human, because that was kind of what he always wanted to be, and it's kind of what you want for him.
But if Katie's right, then that makes sense in the context of this plot line.
Yeah, because I think in this movie, like, because Pinocchio never really says that he wants to be a human. Like, he kind of considers himself the same as everyone else, but he never says, I want to be a human boy.
Oh, yeah.
He just wants, like, he wants to please Geppetto, so he's like, oh, well, I want to be Carlo.
Do you think that was his only motivation to be human, was to please Geppetto? Because if that's the case, I can see in the context of like, oh, I'm going to radically accept you as you are. And you can be loved, like Mr. Rogers. People can like you just the way you are,
Right. Yeah.
So
in that context, it sort of makes
Yeah. So maybe I just need to keep that in mind when I watch it, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, because I'm not excusing the Disney live action. I haven't seen it, but like, I think at the end, like, they're like, he may have been human, he may have not been. Yes. We don't know.
Yes, no, the way they did it in this one is so much better than the way they did it in the live action remake.
Oh, so like the live action, they just left it ambiguous of maybe he turned into a boy, maybe he didn't.
Yeah, they said, like, some say that he might have turned, like, I don't remember the exact quote, but it seemed like such a cop-out in that one. And it didn't feel like a cop-out in this one, even though it felt like you wanted him to become a human. It still didn't feel like a cop-out. Yeah. And I accepted it a lot more in this one than I did in the Disney live action remake.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, because you may have wanted him to become a human at the end of the Guillermo del Toro one, but Guillermo del Toro is such a smart storyteller. It's easier to accept because you can tell at least he has a concrete idea.
He cares a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He cares about telling a good story.
I feel like when you go into a Pinocchio movie, you have expectations of he must turn into a human because that's what Pinocchio wants. But I feel like in this movie, like, that's not what Pinocchio wants. And like, so I can understand, like, if you're expecting him to turn into human, but then at the end he does not, that can be like, oh no, he didn't get his goal. But like, I feel like in this movie, his goal wasn't to be human. His goal was to not be a burden,
to be loved.
Yes.
To be loved.
Yeah.
And now that you're saying that, I don't ever remember him saying that he wants to be a human. He does say he wants to be a real boy, but real boy in the context of this movie did not mean a human being made of flesh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That might have been what I was getting confused about, because I was thinking of real boy as a human. But yeah, I might just be I was such a fan of the original Pinocchio from 1940. I might just still have that one on the brain, and that's clouding my.
Well, that's how it's traditionally done. So it's not. I mean, it's not something that you need to say that that's why it was in your brain, but that's just how it's always been done. So the fact that this one didn't, it's just different. So it's, again, him putting his own spin on it.
For a little while, it doesn't make sense at the end of this how the cricket is dead, but he's narrating post-death until you actually see him up with the rabbits at the card table. But it's interesting how they approach death in this, because they could have so easily been like, well, okay, we're together, everything's happy, but then they go on to more death, how Geppetto is aging, and as they're going up to the grave, next thing you know, the monkey's dead, and there's a say it's not so, and everything, and it's almost like a little Tuck Everlasting vibe or something, like, okay, you're just gonna keep on living, but everybody, I mean, it makes sense for all of these characters to die before Pinocchio, though.
Mm-hmm. I kind of, like, a lot of times if a movie ends with everybody dying, I'm checked out. Like, I didn't want this. I hate this.
This one, it makes sense. It's like it's tapping into the natural cycle of life, even though it's sad.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder how much of this is Mexican sensibility infusing into this. Maybe not, but like they seem to have a more accepting concept of death than maybe a lot of people would.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by that. Mexican.
I kind of wondered if some of the way the afterlife worked wasn't based on a little bit of the way Mexicans view the afterlife.
We don't have a Mexican here to help us.
Yeah,
if you're Mexican, comment below.
Yes, exactly.
It's a fairly relaxed and accepting view of death. So he's tapping into the cycles of life of live, love, this is going to happen, keep on living even after it happens. Maybe could be a takeaway there. About cherish the ones that you love, but also keep on living when they're gone. And maybe I'm putting words in their mouths, but you can totally take that away from this movie.
Yeah. No, I think that's the whole point of all of this.
Live. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but I was just looking back at my notes and I didn't read what I wrote for when he comes back, because you have, well, the whole reason that he comes back is Sebastian uses his wish. And I didn't even think of this while we were watching. Sarah said, his wish. When we first watched the movie, Sarah figured it out. And I like it when I can't, like, I figure out so many things towards the end. I like it.
You would think that you'd be the one, like, I had this before we even pushed play, you know. I'm exaggerating, but
Sarah saw that coming, and I thought that was a great way to have him come back, even though he'd already used up his life as he was told would happen. But then I think this ties back into what Katie was saying, because when he wakes up, Geppetto is apologizing for trying to make him into someone he's not, and he tells him so don't be Carlo, just be exactly what you are. So I think that does tie into what Katie was saying about him not needing to be a human being.
It probably also shows some character develop on Sebastian's part, where his life was revolving around his interests. And it's not like he was a bad guy, but now he's invested in these people and he's willing to be self-sacrificial. And
because at the beginning, he already knew what he wanted, his wish. He wanted to get his book published.
Which is understandable.
Yeah.
But then he uses up his wish to save Pinocchio instead, which I really
You know how hard it is to get books published in the cricket world.
Well, since he was living with them afterwards, maybe they were an advocate for him and taking his tiny little manuscript to the publishers. Hopefully he got
least they could do.
Yeah. After all I've done for you.
And I should also say the line after that, Pinocchio tells him, then I will be Pinocchio and you will be my papa. Will that do? That will do. Which is really sweet.
Yeah.
The hugs wouldn't be that great, though. I mean... Better make sure the wood's smooth.
Smooth, yeah.
Keep him sanded.
Yeah. And definitely don't take him out in the rain. You know what happens to wood, like.
Varnish him good.
Did they ever put clothes on him, or did he just stay? Okay, he was himself
at one point.
He was himself.
Yeah, he was definitely himself.
A few things I noticed that was kind of fun is Volpe had a long nose and he was a big liar, so I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I felt like did they intentionally give him fox-like hair?
Yes.
I didn't catch it at first, but then like halfway through the movie, I was like, wait a minute, he's the fox, and then I noticed the hair, and then I was like, Volpe, fox. I was like, how did I miss this?
I was Googling it, and it wasn't it Italian for fox?
Yeah. He also has a fox handle on his staff.
I didn't notice that.
I don't think I noticed that either.
Oh,
the layers.
I feel bad.
There's so much in this movie that I'm sure the next time you watch it, you'll catch more things that you didn't notice.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's stuff that we all missed that we haven't talked about. And somebody's probably sitting at home listening to this thinking, why aren't you talking about that? Well, we didn't know.
We watched a short thing on the making of, and it makes sense because they talked about, even for Spetsatora's pants, they had all of these different patterns of the stripes, and they were unanimous, like this pattern for his little stripy pants. And there would have been probably 1,000,001 decisions like that going into this film. But yeah, no, that's interesting about the walking stick. But no, you have a whole rainbow of abusive, dysfunctional relationships that are resolved one way or another in this movie, and overall it's a pretty satisfying experience.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm not totally on board with the ending, I would watch this again probably.
Oh yeah. And
maybe even with my family. So
I would say that this is by far my favorite Pinocchio version I've ever seen.
I think I can handle it better than the 40s one. And I'm fine with you loving the 40s one. It's just, as an adult watching it, that was disturbing.
Yeah, it's just surprising to me that the Guillermo del Toro version is less disturbing to you than the Disney version. Think of that.
Yeah.
Why is that surprising? The bad guys get their comeuppance.
I think that's probably the thing that we found the most disturbing, was how real the human greed and evil was in the Disney version, and the fact that they never got any just desserts. They just got away with everything.
The little boys can't go home to their mamas after they're being turned into monkeys. I mean, that's hard. and I think because I grew up being interested in World War II history, those elements don't surprise me as much as maybe they would. Because I've seen way worse. I've watched footage from World War II that would be far from, which that's, I don't know whether that's good, be far worse than this. So yeah, the references make sense to me. See me bringing up the facts about indoctrination in the schools and shooting, your dog, and so I'm more prepared. But human trafficking in that first one is just so disturbing to me. I think that's the biggest thing for me. And then you have those dark creatures too that are basically kind of ape-like creatures with the glowing eyes. Like, it's,
and they're not even, you don't even hardly see them. They're just they're so brief but so mysterious and creepy,
so sinister. So whereas even though the boys were being misled in a way in that war, definitely being misled, it's different than them being, it's just such a different vibe.
I see what you're saying.
It's just funny because Del Toro's known for his extremely disturbing stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
I was going into this movie like, oh no, and I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because of Guillermo del Toro.
I was like, I'm watching this in the morning because if it gets creepy, I'm
right. You need to get some time to have your palate cleansed before I go to bed.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, this movie was pleasant. Pinocchio was adorable, and there was a monkey in it, so
you're good.
Nice.
So yeah, I'd say we all liked it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was good.
Well, does anybody have any more nuggets they just have to get in there before we all sign out?
I have one more Spazzatura fun fact.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he's voiced by Kate, oh gosh, her name.
Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett. And the reason why is because they were working on a different movie together, her and Del Toro, and she's like, oh my gosh, I want to be in your next movie. And he's just like, well, I've already got all the voice cast except for a monkey. And she's just like, I will be that monkey. I need to work with her.
And didn't she just really love working with him? Wasn't that part of the motivation?
Yes.
Yeah, she's like, I love working with you so much. I would play a pencil for you, is what she said.
Right. And I I'm not like a religious follower of the Hot Ones episodes, but I watched the one where she was on there and she was talking. Wasn't she talking about her part? I don't know if you watched that.
I didn't see that
on there, and how she had studied the voices of monkeys.
Yeah.
And to try and get like she was into this, like she was committed.
Yeah. She also, I guess, based the laugh off of Del Toro's laugh, so I don't know if that's a flattering thing or not. I mean, I'd be flattered, but
it's kind of a cute fact.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, oh, that makes so much sense because you would think it was very weird that Guillermo del Toro decided to cast Kate Blanchett as the monkey, which is totally random. But
yeah,
no, but now
it works.
Now it does work.
She did great. She seems like a nice person.
I mean, who would be crazy and turn down if someone's like, "You can voice a monkey"? That's just what I'm asking.
Probably lots of people, but
But
thankfully there are those who would be excited to and bring her commitment to the role.
Yeah. No, she did so good.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, that's kind of fun.
As if it wasn't apparent enough, because I have to like a random weird character. My favorite character was Spazzatura.
What about you guys? What would you say your favorite character was if you had to pick one? And it's okay if you have to caveat and be like, well, I need to pick two.
For me, it's probably a tie between Spazzatura and Pinocchio.
Okay.
Yeah, join the monkey fandom. I don't know.
What about you, Eli?
My favorite character might be Death.
Oh, hey! Yeah. I wasn't expecting you to be my buddy with that.
I agree with you on Death. I just really love that character. It's like
she's great. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh look, we tied. Well, there could only be one winner.
So get out the gun.
Well, on that note, we probably can end this one here.
Sure.
We covered a lot.
I'm glad we were able to do it tonight.
Yeah. I'm glad we finally got this one done. It turned out good.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite movies from last year, and I'm glad we could give it a good long podcast because there was a lot to go over.
Yeah.
And thankfully somebody put out a good Pinocchio in this whole lineup of Pinocchios.
Yes.
Yeah. Before the year ended, we got a good Pinocchio movie.
Yes.
All the many Pinocchios that are coming out recently. It's so bizarre that is a trend. Usually trends are like a topic.
It's
like vampires or werewolves. But now it's like Pinocchio for some reason.
So specific. Yeah.
Yes, very specific.
But hey, this one, I predict that this movie is probably going to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. That's my prediction. So it paid off, I think.
I would not be surprised. I was really hoping for Marcel the Shell. I'll be very glad if it gets a nomination, but I have a feeling that this one is going to win Best Animated Feature.
And I loved Marcel.
If Marcel pulls it out, I will be surprised and delighted. But this one is very deserving as well.
Yeah, Marcel deserves a nomination at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But as far as all the work and everything that went into this film, it deserves to win something. I don't know what all it would be up against, but like if something surpasses this, then we need to watch it. So
the only one would be, for me at least, would be Marcel the Shell, which we have seen. So
yes.
There have been other good ones, but nothing that came close to these, for me anyway.
Oh, one last trivia. I guess this is the longest stop motion animated film
ever.
Oh, really?
It was almost 2 hours long.
Wow.
And usually the cap for animated movies is usually 90 minutes. Not many animated movies go past 90.
But it doesn't feel too long. Like they needed that time to tell the story. So kudos to them.
Kudos for them dying in that studio. Stop motion animated.
Yeah, they put in a lot of work.
Well, thank you for the fact.
That is a fun fact. Like, you're right that usually animated movies last 90 minutes. And especially stop motion films are hardly ever long because those are the most time consuming to make.
Cool.
Also, Guillermo del Toro's first animated film in history. For all the Guillermo del Toro fans out there, that's an interesting fun fact.
Yay, make more, please.
Yeah, become Wes Anderson.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Just do random stop motion movies here and there. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great. I love that.
Well, I guess on that note, you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you? Katie?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Katie Draws Things. I draw things at times, but that didn't fit in Twitter's naming thing, so.
And Eli?
Yeah, I'm also on Twitter. I'm at eJunkie2014. I just talk about movies and TV shows and video games and all kinds of stuff. And I also have a blog where I go more in depth into specific subjects called eJunkieblog.com. You can find me there too.
And Sarah?
You can find my artwork on Redbubble and Society6 under the name of Turnip Wilson, like the vegetable.
Okay, well, until next time, thanks for joining me.
I was happy to be here.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing to do on a Friday night.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to talk about animation and monkeys and not sound weird, so.
We're here for you. We're here for you.
Those are great topics. People should talk about them more.
This is like a really good Friday night. Animation and monkeys, like what's better than that?
Yeah, there we go.
And the Oscar goes to Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Guillermo del Toro first saw Walt Disney's Pinocchio as a child and felt it was the first time somebody captured how scary childhood could be.
Animation is cinema. Animation is not a genre. And animation is ready to be taken to the next step. We are all ready for it. Please help us. Keep animation in the conversation. I would like to thank Netflix and Ted Sarandos for sustaining his faith in us to make this movie. And I want to dedicate this to the love of my life, my wife Kim, my kids, and my mom and pop. They're not here anymore, but they are here with me. And I'm your son, and I love you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform or to our YouTube channel. Make sure to follow my co-hosts as well, and if you want more content from us, check out one of the other podcasts in the iHeart Movies Podcast Network, or check out my brand new Patreon. My link tree, as well as any other relevant links, will be in the description. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.